Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to my film class. I hope everyone is well, and welcome to this new series on the channel for Premiere Pro. So we've mainly been looking at After Effects on this channel so far, but today I thought we'd start on a new series and we'd try Adobe Premiere Pro. So for anyone who doesn't know what Premiere Pro is, it's another Adobe software which is all built for film editing. And the great thing about Premiere Pro is that it's very compatible with all sorts of different projects that you might want to edit. And it's a software that I've used for a very, very long time. And it's probably one of my best and one of the software that I know the best. I'm very excited to get into this tutorial, and hopefully you can learn a lot. If you're a new beginner in Premiere Pro and you've never given it a go before, then hopefully this might encourage you to give it a go. And if you know Premiere Pro already, or you've already had some insight into how it works, then hopefully you might learn some other new tricks along the way, other things that I might be sharing with you, things that I've learned, and hopefully things that be able to add to your toolkit for when you next use Premiere Pro for an edit. So we're going to jump straight into Premiere Pro. So for anyone who doesn't know as well, just before I quickly start, I have got a weekly email newsletter that's been starting. So if you would like to join that, then every week I'm going to be sending out an email newsletter, which is going to give you information about what to expect in next week's live stream, so that you can get ahead and have a look at some of the content in advance and get your questions ready for that live stream. So hopefully by the time we go live, you've got all your questions, you've maybe had a go at it, seen some of the problems that you maybe have faced, and we can hopefully try and debug those together here in the live stream. So hopefully that is something that you might be interested in signing up to. And yes, so we're going to start in Premiere Pro today, and then hopefully at some point we'll be doing some other tutorial videos for Premiere Pro on some more advanced things about editing and techniques that you might want to use as well. So we're going to dive straight in, and I am going to be trying this new thing in this live stream today. I actually have this kind of whiteboardy thing set up, so hopefully I can draw on screen and show you some other things. It might be a bit easier for me to explain certain techniques and where things are in the actual software, so hopefully that is something that you like, and let me know if it is either distracting or whether you do like it in this live stream. So let's get started with Premiere Pro. So if you're unfamiliar with Premiere Pro, the first time that you'll open it up, you'll see a screen like this. You might actually get the home page, which asks you to create a new project. Obviously, the best thing would be to create a new project. And then you can get started with actually creating your first video edit in Premiere Pro. People also don't always talk about the audio editing capabilities of Premiere Pro. It's actually a great software for being able to edit audio as well. It's got loads of different features, and actually a lot of the videos that you edit, both professionally or maybe as a hobby, you actually don't need any other software for editing audio. I know when I edit my videos, a lot of the YouTube videos that I do solely in Premiere Pro. I do video and audio in Premiere Pro. For some of the more professional things, I have used other software like Pro Tools or other, which is a non-Adobe software that's actually by Avid. I think Adobe has Audition as well, which is pretty good. But Premiere Pro, don't underestimate it, actually has some great audio editing capabilities, and a lot of things that you can do with it, which is pretty cool. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to do all of the editing just within this one software. So to start off with, we have a few different sections of our screen, a few different panels that we can use for different things in Premiere Pro. So the first panel that we have is the one at the bottom here. And this panel is basically our project panel, where we can create bins, which are essentially folders, in order to store our different media that we might be using in our video edits. So for example, what we might need to import are footage, so video footage that we want to actually edit. That may include audio footage if you have dialogue with the video, or if your in-camera had an in-camera microphone, there's always normally an audio file with that video. You might also want to import things such as sound effects, SFX. You might also want things such as graphics, so maybe titles. You might also want to import music if you want to add music to your edit. So this is basically the area where we can create folders and organize our footage within Premiere Pro. And it's great. It's a great place to start because you always want to make sure that the folders are nice and organized and neat, because you do end up using a lot of different videos and a lot of different files in Premiere Pro. And it's always great to make sure that it's all nice and organized within one spot. The other sections of our software here is we have kind of a tools panel here where we can access some of the basic tools that you might need for editing. So these might include the razor tool, the selection tool, the hand tool to be able to move around some of the clips in our timeline panel, the text tool to be able to, or the type tool I should say, in order to add text and graphics to our video edits. So that's where we can find some of those basic tools. The next panel that we have, this rather larger panel here, this is the timeline panel where we're actually going to be able to make those edits to our clips and audio. So that will become a bit more apparent once we actually get to editing our content. So what we'll do to start off with, in order to stay nice and organized, which is always a best practice right from the start when you start using Premiere Pro, what we're going to do is we're going to create some folders for our footage first. So there's a few ways we can do this. We can either go to this icon at the bottom of the project panel here, or we can right click and go new bin. And remember, bin is a folder in Premiere Pro. So let's call this one footage. I'm just going to have to select this here. So that's where we're going to be putting our video footage for this project. Also going to create another folder, so another bin. And I'm going to call this one SFX, and that's going to be for our sound effects that we want to actually add to this video edit. I might also include another one, music, because I think we want to add some music to our video. And then I think we might create just one more. We might create some more later, but we'll call this one sequence. And the sequence is actually going to be the timeline sequence on which we're actually going to edit this project. So to start with, let's import some footage. So we're going to double click on our footage, and as you can see, we get a new bin panel opening here, which is the footage panel. So in order to import our footage, there's a few ways you can do this. You can either go to File and Import, or as you can see, the shortcut is Command and I, or that will be Control and I if you're on Windows. Or you can right click and select Import. So next you can see your normal folders have opened up. In my case, it's Finder because I'm on a Mac. And as you can see, I've automatically actually got the folders where I have all of my footage. So I'm going to select on the footage panel, and you can either select just one clip, or you can hold Shift and select all of your clips and then just press Import. So now we've added all of that footage within Premiere Pro within this bin folder. So now we can actually manipulate and use those clips in our edit. Next, we're going to go to the project panel back. I want to import some other things as well. So I'm going to go to the SFX folder, the sound effects. I'm going to press Command and I on my keyboard in order to import. And I'm going to go to sound effects and import the two tracks that I have here. And these are MP3 files, so those are both audio files. You can also import any other file like .wav or .mp4 if you have a video attached to it. Premiere Pro allows for a lot of different file types to be used in your project. Music, I'm also going to import some music. I'm going to right click again. And then I'm going to go to my music folder and add the music that I've got for this video. Perfect. So we've introduced some of those clips and sound effects and music that we're going to be using in our edit. But now we'd actually like to start creating an edit. So there's a few different ways you can create sequences. So sequences are essentially the sequence of clips that we edit together in order to create our video. These sequences we can see in the timeline panel. At the moment, we have no sequences, as it currently says. There's a few different ways you can create this. I'm going to show you the easiest way to create it, but I'm also going to show you a way which I prefer, which is a bit more, it allows you to set the correct settings to start with, rather than actually having to go back later and change it. So the quickest way you can do this is actually holding and dragging on a clip and just dragging it onto the timeline panel. The downside of this is that this sequence setting is going to be to the settings of your clip. So whatever settings and properties your clip has are automatically going to be applied to this sequence. And that may include things such as frame rate, the size of your sequence. So for example, I think this video is in 4K, which means that if you're shooting or if you're wanting to edit a HD video, this sequence is actually going to be at the incorrect size for your edit. So the way that I prefer, instead of doing this, even though it's a nice and quick way to do this, is we'll go back to the project panel. And as you can see, we have our sequence folder. So I'm going to create a new sequence in this. And to do this, you can right click and you can go to new item or sequence. I think there's another way of doing that here. I think if it's probably maybe sequence, maybe not. There used to be one. So maybe the easiest way is still to do just new item, and you can select sequence here. So from this new sequence panel that we have, or window that we have opened, as you can see, we have some of the standard sequences that we might use in broadcast and in video editing today. So some of the key ones are obviously HD, which is a HD video, which is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. As you can see, 1920 pixels in H, which is the horizontal axis. And then we have 1080 pixels in the V, the vertical axis. So up and down and left and right for this one. The frame rate is 25 frames per second, and that is standard for PAL. If you're using broadcast, or if you're from the States or from other places in the world, they actually use a different frame rate. It tends to be 29 point something, or close to 30 frames per second standard. You can also double your frame rate to 50 frames per second, or as in the Americas or other countries, you might want to go for double of 29.97, which is 59.64, basically 60 frame rates per second. The reason that we have these different frame rates is just the way that film developed over the history of video editing, etc. And it was just slightly different in different geographical zones. I'm in Europe at the moment, so I tend to use 25 frames per second. That said, a lot of people in Europe use 29. These days, it doesn't really matter. It's more stylistic choices. Those extra few frames might make it a bit more smooth, especially if you start editing at 50 frames per second. So you're going to have a lot more frames per second, which is going to make your footage look a lot smoother. You can even go up to 120 frames per second, which they've done in some of the films nowadays, such as Gemini Man, I think, shot in 120 frames per second and was also shown in cinemas at 120 frames per second. But the viewing experience changes a lot because it becomes a much smoother video than something that might be 25 or 24 frames per second. So we're going to stick to 25 frames per second. As you can see, they've also got some other presets for different social medias, and if you're using 4K, etc. But I'm just going to stick to HD 1920 by 1080 pixels and 25 frames per second for today. As you can see, it's also giving you some extra information about the sample rate of the audio, etc. But just to start with, I wouldn't worry too much about that if this is your first time using Premiere Pro. So I'm going to press OK. We might want to give it a quick name, actually. So I'm going to call this first draft, because this is going to be my first draft of my video edit. So we're going to press OK. And as you can see, that's automatically created the sequence in this folder. So we can always find that back just by going to that bin that says sequence, and we have our different sequences. So the benefit is, if by doing it this way, if you wanted to create a second draft, you could go ahead and create a new sequence again, create a second draft, and you can always go back to the first draft to see the changes or things that you've wanted to keep, or that and so you can see the history of your edits, which is very handy. As you can see, it's also automatically actually loaded our timeline panel and the sequence on our timeline panel. So at the top here, it now says first draft, which is great. So we know which sequence we're editing. If we had multiple sequences, we'd have multiple sequences open here. You can always close those by just going on that on the icon that has 3 lines, horizontal lines, and you can just press close panel if you want to only have one sequence open at one time. So in our timeline panel, we have 2 different areas we can edit. We have video, which is this kind of top section, and then we have audio, which is the bottom section here. And obviously there are different cases where you might want to edit the audio and the video. We also have different icons here which allow us to manipulate different features of the different clips and these different video channels that we have and these audio channels that we have. This kind of line in the middle splits the video, which is above, and then splits the audio, which is just below that. So in order to add our footage to our clip, there's again a few different ways we can do this. So we can go back to the project panel and go to our footage. So as you can see, I've got 13 clips in my footage folder or my footage bin at the moment, which I can use in this edit. At the top here, we've also got another panel that I haven't mentioned yet, which is the source panel. And that top left panel essentially allows us to source any material in our footage and our bins and see if we want to bring it into our edit. So once we've previewed, it's almost a preview panel really. If you've previewed the clips that you've taken into your source, you can then drag it from the source into the timeline. And then on the right, we have another panel, which is our program panel. And this panel essentially allows us to preview our edit, our final edit for this sequence. It's not going to be our final edit overall, but it's our final edit for the sequence. So we can see the actual changes to the actual program edit that we're making. So what that will do is that will represent all of the footage that's in that timeline panel, and we'll be able to see it like that. That's kind of the process. Another way you could do it is automatically drag the clips into the timeline panel and actually skip out this top panel. It's totally up to you how you prefer to work. Sometimes it's better to be able to preview the footage before you actually have a lot of footage in this timeline panel, and it becomes a little messy to organize and you're not quite sure what's what anymore. But other people do prefer to just automatically bring their footage into the timeline panel and edit it from there directly, which is normally how I prefer to edit. But I will show you the different way of doing it using the source panel first. So for example, if I go to the first clip that we have, which is not in order, so if I double click on this clip, you can see that it's automatically going to load in this source panel here. So I can now actually preview this clip from the start of the clip all the way to the end of the clip just by pressing spacebar or by pressing this play button icon here. And I can have a look at the clip and see what parts of it I might like to use. Once you've decided what sections of this clip you'd like to use, you can use the letters I and O on your keyboard to set some parameters, some margins, which essentially allows you to define the area of the clip that you would like to use. So for example, if I say I prefer this middle section of this clip, perhaps about this length, then I can drag and hold onto the source panel footage and I can drag it into my timeline. And what this is automatically going to do is only keep footage between these two sections. So once again, if you wanted to create the first one, you needed to press the letter I on your keyboard or the letter O if you want to set the out marker. It's also going to give you this clip mismatch warning. Now, this might not always come up. If it doesn't come up for you, then great, the sequence settings and your clip settings match, which is great. In this case, my sequence settings, because I created a HD 1920 by 1080 and 25 frames per second sequence, the clip does not match the sequence settings. So the clip is a 4K video, which is obviously much, much larger than a HD sequence or a HD video. So it's saying that the clip does not match. And would you like to change the sequence settings to match the clip? Essentially reverse what we decided to do earlier and create a HD sequence. So in this case, I'm actually not going to change it because I'd like to keep these existing settings. So my draft is automatically going to be correct. However, one thing you will notice is because the clip is a 4K video, in this case, you can see the full extent of the clip. You can see all of the clip. In this case, we can only see a zoomed in version. And that is because if we look at the source monitor here, the width of this clip is 4K. So it's about 4,000 pixels roughly. It depends on which 4K settings we have. And we've also got a height which is much, much larger than the height of our program, of our sequence settings. So what we're getting is a much smaller view of this clip over here, because it's matching the sequence settings, which is obviously much, much smaller. So we want to be able to change that, and this requires us to actually transform the clip in order to make it fit within our settings. Again, this might be too much information if yours automatically does automatically match because you've shot HD and you're actually importing it to a HD sequence as well. However, there are going to be plenty of times when you're going to have this issue. So a quick fix that we can apply is we can actually go into our timeline panel. And as you can see, now I've dragged in the video clip, which is in this first section here. I can actually right click on that video clip and I can choose scale to frame size. And this is automatically going to scale that clip to the correct size for my sequence. A few things to note is this won't automatically be correct for all clips, depending on what format they were shot in. You'll see an example of this when I import one of these other clips in just a minute. But this is a quick fix, a quick way to actually be able to scale your clip to the correct size for your sequence. So next I'm going to preview another clip that I might want to use. So for example, I have this initial clip here and it's my two protagonists walking towards the bridge. So I might take just a small section here, so I can use the letter I in order to make that initial cut. And then I can press O maybe to make another cut around here. I'm only going to choose this, and then I can hold and drag and drop that onto my timeline panel in order to continue the edit. As you can see, you can add multiple video channels here. So this gives you a nice flexibility and range, being able to edit at multiple levels and have footage actually overlap one another. So for example, it'll cut over there if you want to be able to add cool effects and things. For now, we're just going to stick to just basic editing, but be aware you can stack videos on top of each other, and this exact same applies for audio as well. So I'm going to continue having a look at some of these other clips. Maybe I want a clip of the couple approaching the bridge, and maybe we'll take an initial shot somewhere like here and grab a few frames like this, just by using I and O to make that edit again. And as you can see, we're having the same issue here. This clip is also in 4K, whereas my sequence settings is in HD. So once again, what I can do is right click and set scale to frame size. And here we have this other issue where we have these boxes appearing at the top and bottom of our clip. We will fix this in a minute. There's a trick to being able to fix this. But again, this is why it's so important to be able to recognize the different footage that you're applying to your sequence and making sure that everything is actually going to be the same at the end of your sequence. So just like that, we can create something. We can also add a few other shots. Maybe we want a shot of them on the bridge, maybe here. So this will be a nice way to continue the story. Maybe we want a shot of them coming towards a stop, something like that. Obviously, this is not the same bridge. This is stock footage that I've got, so I'm going to maybe make a few edits like so. So let's have a look. What else have we got? Maybe we want this introduction sequence. This is a nice way, an establishing shot, a nice big wide shot to establish the location of our protagonists in this scene. Maybe we want a small glimpse of where they are to start with. So maybe we'll start with something like that. And then, as you can see, you can just move the clips around on your timeline panel. A few different things you can do on here. So you can select your clips just by holding and dragging if you want to select multiple clips. Say I had another clip just underneath. I'm using the selection tool, the first tool here, which is V on your keyboards for both Windows and Mac. So I can just hold and drag and select multiple clips. In order to trim or cut my clips to a smaller size, for example, if I think that this clip is holding for a little too long, maybe I want it to stop at around the 3-second mark. Once I hover my cursor over the ends of one of the clips, as you can see, it changes to this red arrow pointing inwards towards the clip. This basically allows me to adjust the length of the clip if I want to maybe shorten that, like so. As you can see, if there's a gap, it's just going to be a black screen. Nothing's actually going to appear in our edit. So we always need to make sure that there's something there if we want not to have a black screen in our video. So maybe I'm going to drag this one out a little bit, get a bit of earlier shots, something like this. And you can press spacebar or you can press play here in order to preview your edit on your program panel. In order to zoom in and out, as you can see, I've zoomed in. At the bottom here, we have the scroll bar. And at the sides of that, we have these two small circles. Just by holding and dragging that, we can either zoom in or zoom out of our timeline panel edit. You can also do the same for the vertical in order to preview more or less of the video channels that you might have in your edit. So maybe we want a shot of the bridge after this to establish the location of the bridge. And we can maybe cut it somewhere like here. I'm going to do a pretty rough edit today. Hopefully yours is going to maybe look a little bit better. And we'll just extend that out slightly. As you can see, I like to use this kind of staircase thing technique. The reason I like to do that is just because it's very clear which are different clips. If I have them all on the same video channel line, which would be the exact same look, except they're all on the same line, it can be slightly harder to see where the cuts are specifically. So I prefer to lay it out just like this kind of staircase look, like so. But if you, for example, have different clips, so maybe you have multiple shots, if you shot a scene with two different cameras and you have them both at the same time, you can actually overlap them like so, and then you can match them up in time, and then you can just choose whichever clip you want to use at different points. On the left here, so I've just made a very quick edit just using these 5 different clips that we have here today. On the left here, we do have a few different settings that you might want to use. First, we have a lock setting, and this basically means that we can't actually edit anything on this video channel. So for example, you're really happy with this and you don't want to accidentally make any mistakes, then this is a great way in order to ensure that you won't make any mistakes on that channel. This next one essentially has to do with where you can copy and paste different clips into your scene. I wouldn't worry too much about that or this clip or this icon for now either. This icon here essentially chooses whether we can actually see the videos clips on this channel in our final edit. So as you can see, I've now hidden all of the channel videos on this channel. And if you want to bring them back, just make sure that's turned on. So we can just press spacebar and preview our very quick and rough edits. We just have a quick establishing shot. Our characters walking towards this bridge, which isn't the same bridge. And now they're just arriving at the edit itself. Maybe we want one final shot, just a close-up perhaps of one of the characters so we can see them on the bridge itself. So maybe we want to choose this one. And as you can see, I've once again got to right click and go to scale to frame size in order to make that clip work. Maybe something like that. Obviously, there's a whole load of different editing techniques that you could use in this. Once again, I've made use of establishing shots, so wide shots to start with, in order to set the scene before we introduce our characters in the scene. And again, another establishing shot so we can see where they are in this world that we've created. And again, now they've arrived at the bridge. This last shot is a bit of a jump from one clip to the other. So maybe we'll actually just end it on that other one, just like so. And then we just have our very short sequence here where we're able to see our full edit. Perfect. One of the things that you might encounter, which might throw you off, is obviously once you hold and drag on these clips, you can see that it's giving you indications of areas to snap to the end of the other clip. If this is not appearing, just make sure you have this icon snap in timeline turned on. If you have this turned off, as you can see, you can move it anywhere randomly and it's not going to align properly. You don't want to have these small gaps between your clips. So if you press snap the snap icon, as you can see, it's automatically going to snap, so there's no gap between our two clips here either. A few other techniques and tools that you might want to use in Premiere Pro in order to edit your clips very quickly. There's the razor tool, which is this tool right here, which is the shortcut C on your keyboard. And this tool basically allows you to make cuts at different points in your clips, like so. There is another shortcut for that as well. For me, it's Command and K, but I'm not quite sure if I've maybe changed that setting. So in order to find any keyboard shortcuts in Premiere Pro, what you can do is you can go to Premiere Pro and go to keyboard shortcuts. And for example, so if you wanted to find that razor tool that we just used, as you can see, the shortcut to that is C. If you want to do a ripple delete, which is quite a good one to know as well, say you have a few different clips here, which has a gap in between. So for example, if I move these to the side, if you have a gap like this and you want to quickly be able to delete that, you can either right click and ripple delete, and that's automatically going to get rid of the gap. Command and Z, which is what I'm using at the moment to undo. Or you can go to Premiere Pro, go to keyboard shortcuts, and actually find the shortcut for it. So for example, ripple delete, like so. And as you can see, the shortcut is Shift and forward delete for me. So if I hold in, if I press that, Shift forward delete, as you can see, I can now actually delete that gap too. So if you ever want to find a shortcut, which I would highly recommend because they do save a lot of time when you're editing in Premiere Pro, you can literally go to Premiere Pro and go to keyboard shortcuts to find any of the shortcuts that you might find. If you hold in different keys as well, for example, Shift, you'll be able to see all of the shortcuts that go with the Shift or with the Command, for example, such as Command copy and paste, or Command undo, Command and Z, etc. So that's a nice thing to know if you're just starting out in Premiere Pro. If you want to learn your keyboard shortcuts in order to make your workflow much, much quicker, then that is a great way in order to do that. Okay, great. So now we've got our footage in place. Let's try and add some other elements to our edit in order to make it a little bit more entertaining, a bit of a more coherent video edit. So I have some sound effects here in the SFX folder. And the first one that I have is a forest river. So once again, if I double click on that, it's going to preview in our source panel. I can just press play. I will have to turn the volume up for you, like so. Hopefully you can hear that now too. Like so. Once again, what you'll notice is I actually scrolled using my middle mouse button. If you do this, it's actually going to move the timeline indicator, which is this blue icon here, which lets us preview the time at this moment of our edit. It's actually going to move that by the frame. So if I scroll just one click, as you can see, it's only going to scroll by just one keyframe. Not by one keyframe, by one frame. Sorry, I've been using too much After Effects recently. So as you can see, I can just use my middle mouse button and scroll it in order to actually move along the different frames. But once again, I can press play and actually preview the sound of this clip. If I'm happy with that, I can once again use my in and out points in order to choose different parts of this. So for example, I can choose to only include that section, then hold and drag. I'm not quite sure why it's not letting me do that. Very odd. I'll just drag in the clip like this. So this is again once the other way you can do it. As you can see, it's automatically also adapted to whatever we have in that source panel. I'm going to extend it to the duration of our clip just by using that technique that we learned earlier. And I'm going to place it on this first audio channel here. So we have a few additional settings here. We have the ability to mute the track. So if we've placed it down but we're not quite sure, or we want to hear the rest of our edit without this track, then we can press mute and we're not going to be able to hear it. And then we turn mute off, once again we can hear it. I can also press on the solo track in order to hear just this track if I had multiple tracks and I wanted to preview just the sound of the sound effects, then this is one way we could do that. Another thing we have here is the ability to record our own voice. on this track. It's a bit more of an advanced feature, so I'm going to skip it today. But if you want to record your voice directly into Premiere Pro itself, then this is a way you can actually do that in Premiere Pro. So that's another great thing that you might want to use if you're doing something like live streams or podcasting or whatever, or you want to just simply record a quick voiceover for your video, then you can actually record a voice directly in Premiere Pro, and it will create a new audio track for you right here on this audio channel. So I might also just use this other waterfall clip, which I have as well, which is a bit more of a dramatic sound. So I might use that at this stage of my edit, where we actually have a close-up of the waterfall. It might be nice to actually draw some attention to that waterfall itself. So once again, I'm just going to hold and drag the clip in place. As you can see, I didn't create my in and out points. So I might actually use the razor tool, which we learned earlier, shortcut C, and actually cut the clip at the end of our edit so far. Go back to the selection tool using the shortcut V on my keyboard, and then just delete the remainder of this clip. So we cut it nice and quickly to this actual clip. So once again, what you can hear is once I press play, that's quite loud, isn't it? There you are. Once I actually cut to the shot of the waterfall, we have a more heavy sound effects coming into place, and that actually allows us to feel a little bit more in the scene once we cut to that waterfall. Obviously, the cut to the waterfall was very, very direct, and it might be nice to actually fade that audio in slightly. So in order to do that, what we can do is select the clip and press the key commands Command, Shift, and D. This is automatically going to apply fades to our clip. And as you can see, this works for both the visual and the audio elements. So for video clips, you can also press Command and D, sorry, for videos. As you can see, it's automatically going to add a cross dissolve to our clip. I don't want it in our clip, so you can just select them and press delete if you want to get rid of those fades. However, in the audio, it might be nice to have a short fade into our sequence, into our audio clip, and perhaps a short fade out. So now our sequence is going to sound very different. And just like that, we've created added some sound effects to our clip. I think the transition out might be a little harsh, so I can actually extend these fades just by, once again, hovering my cursor to the left of that fade, and actually dragging it out so the fade is over a much longer duration, and it's going to sound much less dramatic. And it's going to fade out much, much slower, just like that. So now we've added some sound effects to our clip. We might also want to add that music. So once again, we can go to our project panel, double click on that bin that we created for music, and drag our music into the scene. Once again, I might want to preview it first in our source panel. So I might want to set the in point at the start, maybe move along a little bit, because I know that my clip is only, if I move my timeline indicator to the end, it's only 11 seconds and 18 frames long. So I can either type that in here to be very specific. I'm just going to roughly estimate it because I can always trim it on the timeline itself. I'm then going to drag that music into our project, and I'm just going to trim it to the end like so. I might do what we did earlier and press Command, Shift, and D in order to add the fades to the music too, so it's a nice gradual fade in. And I might also add some fades to the other sound effect that we had, the quieter water flow. If, by the way, you want to control the size or the length of these fades before you add it in, so you can obviously do that afterwards by dragging and extending or shortening those fades to our audio clips, and the same to our video clips. But if you want to control how much it's automatically set to, you can just go to Premiere Pro and then go to Settings, and then you can go to Timeline. And from here, you'll be able to set the audio transition default duration, which at the moment is 1 second. So every time I press Command, Shift, and D, it's automatically going to add a fade of 1 second to my audio files. And you can also set the duration for your videos. As you can see, this is set in frames. So this would actually be 1 second as well, because we have 25 frames per second for our sequence. So you can also be more specific using frames if that's something that you might want to use. So now we've added our music as well. And as you can see, just like that, we've created a very short and simple video edit in Premiere Pro. We've added some music, we've added sound effects, and we've also added our video clips itself. Obviously, it would be a very different edit if you actually had dialogue to include with your videos. In my case, I couldn't actually find any copyright-free dialogue to use in this video edit, so unfortunately I couldn't show you that. But the process is very similar because you'd automatically drag those audio files in with your video edit clips. So you'd be able to edit it automatically just like that. Once again, you can create multiple audio tracks or channels, so you can keep adding on just by dragging onto the bottom. It doesn't automatically just stop at 4. If you want to create another one, you've just got to drag it below the mix master volume. And as you can see, you can keep creating audio tracks just like that in order to continue the amount of layering you're doing with your audio files in Premiere Pro. So there might be a few other things that we want to add to our video edit. So for example, we might want a title to include at the start of our video. Now, like I said at the beginning, we have this type tool here, which we can use to create text. So I'm just going to press on that once and then press on our screen. As you can see, it's going to create a new layer in our video tracks, and this is going to be a graphic layer. So I can now type in this box that it's created. So I can create a title. So for example, maybe forest hike, like so. I can go to the selection tool and I can actually move that around my screen. However, we might want to be a bit more specific or even be able to control things such as the font size and the text parameters. So in order to do that, what we can do is go to Window and then go to Essential Graphics. And from here, we get a whole panel just dedicated to the graphic settings for our graphic layer. Now, I'm actually going to reduce the size of this layer so it only extends over my first clip. As you can see, it's automatically going to cut the moment we reach the second clip. So maybe some of the things I want to change, I'd like to actually center this text layer. I can obviously do that by eye, but it might be nice to do it using actual settings. So I can use Align to be very precise with this by using center horizontally, and I can also center it vertically just like so. You can change some of the text parameters. So at the moment, I've got Greycliff as my font, but you can choose any other font that you might want to use. For example, I could choose the heavy font like so. I can change the text size just by holding and dragging left or right using these parameters here. You would have to realign the text because at the moment it's no longer centered. You could do that here by just aligning the text within the text box itself and then aligning it. Now any change that you would make is automatically going to be centered. So that is one thing that you could use. So for example, I might want to add that. I can change the text width, the font width. At the moment, it's set to heavy, and this isn't an option that you might get with all fonts. But for the Greycliff CF fonts, it gives you a whole range of different text width opportunities. You can also customize your text. You can change the tracking, the kerning, and the leading, all things that we actually covered in last week's live stream on my design class in Photoshop. So if you're interested in how text works in design, and that would also apply to text in video edits, then do check that video out. That was a live stream I did on my design class last week. You can also italicate your text, or you can make it bold, etc. So these are all different style choices that you have for your text. You can also change the fill, the color of the actual text. I think red would probably work best for this edit, although white would work best. However, red would be the complementary color with green because most of my shot is green. However, I'm choosing to stick with red just here. You can add a stroke, so an outline color to your text if you think that works well. You can always uncheck that just by using these boxes. You can also add a background just to extend over that text itself. You can change things such as the opacity, whether you want it as a lower opacity or max zero transparency. Also, you can change whether you want the box to be larger, or you can also change the roundness, so you can actually have a rounded edges to your box, to your background. You can also add a shadow if you think that looks great on your text. A lot of these things I'd normally use, you could use either Premiere Pro to create a lot of these effects. I might actually add a shadow because I think that actually makes the text stand out better from the background in this case. But a lot of these things you can actually also create in Photoshop or in After Effects and then import those files into Premiere Pro and edit those directly. For example, you can just import a Photoshop file, just a raw Photoshop document into Premiere Pro and use that and manipulate that file just as an image or as a document file, and that can be your title as long as the background is transparent, of course. So after that, once we've added our text, we can now preview our edits once again. One thing to notice, every time that your timeline indicator moves along the horizon of your timeline, it's automatically going to jump along to the next section of your timeline. So we've added text, music, sound effects. We've added our video clips. You could obviously also add your audio dialogue. If you'd like to add some basic transitions to your footage, although I would recommend cuts because cuts tend to be the best way to actually transition between different video elements in your scene. It's always better to use transitions sparsely than actually use them for every cut. The reason being that it can be a bit disorientating, and cuts actually are very dramatic and have a lot of meaning and can tend to look the cleanest when you're doing a video edit. But for example, if you wanted to have a transition between these two, I could move them onto the same video track. I could press Command and D. As you can see, it's automatically going to add a cross dissolve or a fade between my two clips here. Because I press Command D, it's also going to add it to the start and the end of those clips, so I could maybe delete those. But as you can see, if you wanted to add a fade between two different clips, that is a quick way of being able to do that. Now finally, one of the other things that we may want to do just before we actually export our clip, and I know I'm covering quite a lot of information, but there's also a lot of things that I am leaving out. So all of these things we will cover in future live streams. So do you have your questions for future live streams? Leave questions in the comments of this live stream. Let me know how long you've used Premiere Pro for and whether you find it an easy software to learn or whether it's something that you'd like a lot more classes in. But do leave me suggestions if there are things that you think I'm missing out, because I am going to be jumping through quite a lot of different topics and there's obviously a lot to cover in Premiere Pro. But hopefully this will give you some of the groundworks on how to use Premiere Pro and some of the fundamentals so you can start creating your own video edits. So one of the things that you might want to do is color grade your project. For example, if you have a lot of different clips, I'm actually going to mute these audio tracks for now, or I'll maybe mute it on the live stream itself, just because I'm aware that that noise keeps jumping through my own voice. So as you can see, some of these edits, these are already quite well color graded and color balanced. And the reason for that is because they are stock footage and they've already been graded to some extent. However, if you have clips which are very different, maybe in different colors, or they have different white and black levels, or you want to be able to change the exposure, saturation, any of these things, once again, what I'd recommend to do is to go to your project panel and create a new bin. And what we'll do is we will create a bin that says adjustment layers. So the great thing about adjustment layers is they're essentially blank layers that you can add within your video file project. So if I double click on here and right click and go new item, and then we can create an adjustment layer. And as you can see, it's going to ask us what settings we would like the layer to cover. So I want it to cover the whole width and height of my sequence. So it's going to be 1920 by 1080 and 25 frames per second as well. As you can see, it's created a new layer, and this layer is blank. There's nothing on this layer. However, the benefit of this layer is that we can apply effects and other things such as color grading to it without automatically applying that to the clips themselves. So if I just create some space, I'm going to put it just below my title, my graphic layer here. As you can see, I can just drag it into the timeline panel, and I'm going to extend it to the entire width of the clip. Now, the first thing that we might want to do is color grade our clip. So the easiest way to do this would be to go to Window, and then we could go to Lumetri Color. And now we have a whole set of different parameters, color parameters that we can change for this clip using the Lumetri Color settings. So we have basic correction, which includes some of the basic features that we also have in Adobe Lightroom, or even in the Camera Raw filter in Adobe Photoshop. So for example, we can change the exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, etc. And the benefit of applying it to this adjustment layer is that it will apply it to the entire clip. So for example, if I change the tint quite dramatically and make it much bluer, as you can see, it's automatically going to apply it to all of my clips. If I had to do this per clip, it would take me a long time in order to actually do this. If I select a different clip, as you can see, the setting is going to reset, and I can change it specifically for this clip. However, it's not going to apply to any of the other clips in our sequence. So I am going to change it just to the adjustment layer. The downside of this is obviously not all clips need to be color graded to the same extent. Some clips might be very overexposed, and therefore we need to reduce the whites in the clip. So for example, where these whites have been crushed, so I'm just going to quickly reset this setting first. I could reduce the white and try and recapture some of that information, or perhaps use the highlights. However, I might not want to apply that to some of these other clips. So that is something that we do have to be aware of. Although it's a benefit that we don't apply it, that we don't have to apply color grading to each clip individually, we do therefore also lose a bit in being able to actually control those different parameters for each clip. So how I recommend you would do this is apply specific clip color grading things to your clips directly. So for example, if you need to fight some overexposure or underexposure, maybe boost the highlights or boost the shadows in order to get it better exposed, then I would do that on the clips themselves. However, if you're trying to create a look or trying to adjust the color for the whole piece, maybe applying a LUT, which you can do just here, and you have all of these standard LUTs which you can apply to your clips in order to create a different effect. As you can see, I've now applied it to that clip only, so I would undo this and apply it to the adjustment layer, which would automatically apply it to the entire clip. Obviously, this is much too intense, this LUT. However, if you do use LUTs, which you can create in Photoshop, and you can create in other software and actually import into Premiere Pro, then I would recommend that you apply this on your adjustment layer. So it applies to all of the clips automatically, and you can adjust just one setting. However, clips individually, I'd recommend that you adjust those settings, for example, only to fight the overexposure or underexposure. Any other creative color changes that you make, I would recommend you do it on adjustment layers. This also means that you don't actually affect the clip quality itself and only apply it to the clip after all effects have been applied to. So the other settings that you have creative settings where you can add tints to the shadows or highlights. And you can also add different looks to your clips with a whole set of different presets that come with Adobe Premiere Pro. But you can also use curves, such as curves in Photoshop, and actually select the different color channels that we have in our clip. It's still RGB, so red, green, and blue based. So I can apply an effect to only the green colors within our clip. Obviously, I'm very much destroying our edit here at the moment. But it's just to demonstrate that you can obviously adjust the blues and only the shadows by moving and manipulating these curves in different ways as well. And once again, you can also change other color factors within the midtones, the shadows, and the highlights of your clips. And maybe target the midtones and you say, I want to make those a bit more blue. For example, you could drag that down here. If you want to reset this, just double click on the circle itself, and that's automatically going to reset the color for that clip. I'm just going to quickly get rid of the LUT that I've applied to this adjustment layer so we don't destroy our clip. Does automatically look a lot less saturated. That's also because I've dragged the highlights down quite a bit here. But as you can see, we have a bit of overexposure. And if you'd like some graphs in order to actually be able to visualize some of these color and light changes within your clips, what you can do is you can go to Window and you can go to Lumetri Scopes. And this is going to give you a whole range of different scopes which allow you to see some of the color information for the clips. And this is automatically going to update depending on where your timeline indicator is. So for example, this top one here shows us that in this clip, the yellow and green colors are much more prominent in the highlights of our clip, whereas the blues are much more prominent in the darker parts of our clips. And you can use this information to actually adjust your colors for each clip specifically, or again, for the clip as a whole. Again, this might be a lot of information for a beginner, so I'd recommend that you only stick to editing colors on the